right, well, let's get started in the interest of time so that we have enough enough time to get to your questions and conversation, because that's part of what this is all about. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's session, Lessons in Leadership, Let's Talk Healthcare, brought to you by the School of Professional Studies here at Brown University, sponsor of the Master of Science in Healthcare Leadership program. Tonight's session, we're focusing on some leadership skills, the essentials of physician leadership in particular, IQ, EQ, and PQ. And we're very happy to have you all joining us. I'm joined tonight by some special guests who are going to help us lead this conversation. So if we can see the next slide, we'll have the panel put up there. So first, I'd like to introduce you all to Ruchin Kansal. He is a visiting professor of the practice in leadership here at Brown University. He's a professor of the practice at Seton Hall University and former director of the Business Leadership Center at the Stillman School of Business. He's also the founder of TGG, that focuses on transforming specialists into special leaders, and Kansal & Company, that advises companies on digital AI strategy and innovation. Prior to this activities that he's up to now, Ruchin spent 20 plus years in industries, most recently serving as the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Strategy for Digital Services at Siemens Healthineers. Pretty exciting job. I'd like to have that job when I grow up, Ruchin. Very fun. And I'm also joined tonight by Elsie Koh. She's a practicing interventional radiologist, and she's the Chief Medical Officer of the American Endovascular and Amputation Prevention Organization. But also importantly for this conversation, she's the founder and CEO of Lead Physician Leadership Program. Lead Physician empowers physicians ready for growth to rediscover their purpose, rekindle their passion, and unlock their potential in academic or private practices. So welcome to both of you. We're really happy to have you here for this conversation. We do these sessions to provide a service to the community as part of Brown's overall global mission to empower the world and bring knowledge to the world. So we're really excited to have everybody here for this conversation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ruchin, and I'm going to hide away for a little while and let this roll.
Thank you, Sandy.
Elsie, on to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'm next. So why physician leadership? And I guess Ruchin, he wanted me to share with you my story as a physician. How did I get into leadership? I did go through the Brown Master Healthcare Leadership Program. I early on, right after, about 2 years after my training, I found myself in a medical director position because of my hands-on skill, not because of my leadership skill. And as such, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go in there, do my job and leave. And I miserably failed. And I was told at a few years later at a Christmas party that I made each and every person in my surgical center cry. And that was a big shock to me. I had no idea. I mean, I knew I made one or two people cry. I had no idea that it was the entire staff at one point with me. And that was, it was a big blow. And that was the turning point. And that's when I realized, you know what, there's something about leadership that we didn't grasp. I know I'm not alone. I mean, I know that most of you didn't make everyone cry, but I know that I know now. And what I wish I knew now, I knew then. But my goal is, and our goal is to teach you some of the crucial things that can really turn yourself around. And physician leadership is so crucial for healthcare and for your well-being with burnout and for the healthcare itself industry. And we no longer can stand back and say, you know what, I'm not doing that. Let them do that and I'll do my job. It cannot be like that anymore. And so glad to be part of this program, glad to have been part of Brown for undergrad and for my master's, and so grateful to Ruchin for giving this talk. I will be emceeing this, so if you have any questions, raise your hand, put your comments in the chat, and we'll get to it as soon as we can, but most of the questions will be answered at the end of this talk. So thank you. Ruchin?
Well, thank you, Elsie, for sharing your story, and not many people would come in front of a crowd and say they failed. and that started their journey of learning. And that is the growth mindset. That's wonderful thing to have. So really, thank you for being vulnerable, and welcome all. Welcome this evening. It's really a privilege to be speaking to all of you about leadership. And before I get into leadership itself, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about why we should even be talking about the topic, right? And I have a number here, 4 out of 5. And 4 out of 5, 80%, what that number denotes in this day and age is physicians. 80% of the physicians are now employed by corporations. My wife is a physician, my son is an aspiring physician, so I have a little bit of an inside view on what that means. But 12 years ago, that number was 2 out of 5. 25 years ago, that number was 1 out of 5. So in 25 years, we have gone from being an individual practitioner who was an expert that a patient came to being part of this corporation where we are now part of a much larger team and we have to operate in that context. So think of it this way. You used to play tennis, you are trained to play tennis, but now you actually have to play soccer. And if you have to play soccer, how many of you can say that you actually learned the skills to play soccer in medical school rather than playing tennis, which was being an individual expert in your field, right? That's how most physicians are even trained today. And I think that's what presents a gap and an opportunity. The gap because if we train physicians to be those individual experts and expect them to be leaders in a soccer game, most likely they will not succeed. And that's what presents the opportunity, which is to thrive in this current practice setting where physicians are part of this team where they have to deliver not just a team of physicians and nurses and healthcare providers, but a team of physicians and nurses and healthcare providers and administrators. They have to complement their medical expertise with business expertise. How does business of healthcare work? How does technology work? I mean, AI, digital. I mean, we complain about EMR still today. The world has advanced a lot more. If we can leverage it, it can make our life easy. And then leadership acumen. And in my view, as a patient who always has had very good experience with physicians and healthcare providers, but has been frustrated by the system till you get to that point, I think if physicians become CEOs, physicians take leadership roles, and they start to shape how healthcare is provided, it can only be good for the patients, good for me, good for your families, good for the world that you serve. And with that, what we want to focus on a little bit today is leadership. What is it? Why should we even talk about it? And how can we really start to build our skill sets to be better leaders? And being a leader just does not mean that we are leaders in the corporate workplace. Having these skills make us better person, better practitioners, better family people, better everything, better part of the society. So that's how, what leadership is, that it's not I'm the CEO. Leadership is how I really show up on day-to-day basis so people around me really grow because of me, because of what I am, because of what I bring to the table. And with that, we are going to open it up a little bit for a discussion, right? I mean, let's role play a little bit. And I'm going to present this scenario to you. And I want to hear from a few of you as to how you will tackle this. So not knowing everyone who's on the call, but I'm assuming some of you are CMOs or aspiring CMOs. And let's just play this scenario where you are now the newly appointed CMO of a very successful multi-specialty hospital. And you have just walked out of a board meeting where a decision was made that it is in the best interest, financial interest of your hospital to be acquired by a regional system. And that's happening to all of us, all of you right now, right? And so you're the CMO who has now charged to give this news to your physicians. Now, the physicians in our hospital, they really pride themselves for the quality of care that they provide. And that is made possible because your culture at the hospital is very collaborative. You have very streamlined operations. You can pick up the phone and talk to each other. And all physicians are really wary of these large systems because they think when it becomes large, you lose that control, you lose patient care, you lose quality of care, and there could be a personal, financial, and well-being impact as well. So you are the CMO. How do you communicate this to your physicians? That's the challenge. That's the question. And I'll open it up, and all of you should be able to really speak up. But let's hear a couple of perspectives. How would you address the situation with the physicians?
So
And
feel
please,
free
there are no
to
wrong.
raise your hand, or just open up your mic or put it in the chat and we can talk.
And please don't be shy. There are no wrong answers here, and it's really a learning, safe environment. So let's just,
Joseph,
address
I
this.
see you unmuted yourself.
Yeah. Hey, thanks everyone. I mean, I think I've not been in exactly this situation, and Elsie, maybe you have. But I think there just needs to be a lot of sensitivity with people, or for people with long-term buy-in, their long-term referral patterns. I mean, both Sandy and Elsie will know I'm back in academics. I was hospital employed. I've worked part-time at VAs. I've been, other than being pure private practice, I've done most of it. So I just think you have to be really sensitive to, some people are going to be selling their practice in this scenario, and that may be a good thing for them. If they're 62 and they want to retire early and they get a balloon payout, that's great. But other people may be 48 and they may be at the apex they may be in the middle of their ramp up in terms of their practice, and how's that going to impact them? I mean, that's the economic side of it. But I think that's where the question's aimed. Is that kind of what you guys were thinking about, those angles?
Well, I mean, the question is, how do you address it to your physician, right? You are absolutely right. There is the economic side, and you said people side, but challenges.
Right. I mean, I think I would fall back on kind of principles of change management, right? You're probably going to know a few people are either big early adopters for any change. They're rabid. They're not going to be everybody, but a few people are going to be big on change no matter what. You may know there's some people who've been pushing for this, but I would kind of go back to general principles of change management and try to rope those people early, and then rope those people in early, and then look at how that might then roll out to others within the institution, and sort of get, there's that curve, right? Early adopters, the kind of the masses in the middle, and then late adopters, and who those people are going to dig in no matter what to try to keep it the way it is. And you kind of want to approach them after you have critical mass from the rest of the group. It'd be one of my strategies. But I would love to hear what Sandy and Elsie have to say as well, because I know either one of them could give a 20 or 60-minute talk on the topic.
No, thank you, Joseph. I know Sandy and Elsie can speak to it. I would love to hear from at least one more person in the audience. What would you do? I know it is evening time, but hey, one more.
Again, there's no right or wrong answer. Thank you for that, Joseph.
Thank you both. While we're waiting for other folks to speak up, I'll just thank Sandy for helping me, both interviewing me for the program and not excluding me, even though I was a surgeon. Long story short there. And thank Elsie. Sandy doesn't know this, but Elsie, I sort of found Elsie on LinkedIn shortly after starting the program. And since I'm a vascular surgeon, she's a VIR, we have a lot of our Venn diagrams overlap, and she helped me a lot at a distance with the program. So I'll just thank them both here.
Thank
now,
you. You're welcome.
No pressure.
I didn't pay him to do that, to say that.
Oh, no, he did not. You should still send me a bill, Elsie. That's another question. So should Sandy. But anyway, we'll discuss that offline.
Wonderful. So Elsie, do we have any other?
I don't see any other words. I mean, what I would just say is I'd like to know a little bit more about, I mean, obviously I'm the CMO of this hospital. I'd like to know how many physicians are there. Communication is the key point. How much have you been a part of this board, and how much do you know, and how much are they willing to listen to you? And if it sounds like the perfect scenario, then I would have, depending on how many physicians I have, I would either speak to them one-on-one first, and then a group. So everyone understands, you understand their concerns so that you can bring it back to the board and make sure we address the things that really allow this hospital to thrive and has been thriving, so that we're not like leaving out things, and we can maintain the status quo of certain things that are important to them. And it's important for the physicians to feel like you really care and you really are understanding of what their needs are, and that they feel that the board supports them. I'll let
Very
you
well
take it from
said.
there, Ruchin.
Yeah, no, thank you for both Joseph and Elsie. What both of you kind of described is depends on the situation. It's a multifactorial problem, and it has to be dealt that way. And you have to apply good change management best practices to really address it. And that's really the point, right? Every situation is different, and every situation has a lot of dependencies. But what is true of every situation is there are three aspects to it. There is the rational aspect, the benefit aspect that both of you alluded to, right? Hospital may make more money, some physicians may make more money, some may retire, et cetera, right? There is the cost side of it as well. Some physicians, as Joseph was saying, who are in the late 40s or early 50s, they may be like, what? Or there may be some who will say, oh, that will never fly, right? And so there is that emotional aspect to every situation. And then because of that, there is group behavior that happens. And good leaders have to be able to manage all three. And if you reflect back and if you reflect on any situation that you have felt a little bit of stress about and where you had to make a decision, you would realize that these are the three balancing acts that you're balancing: the rational, the emotional, and the political. And if those are the three that you are really balancing, wouldn't it be great that you actually knew what they mean and how to really build your skills around them? And that's what really brings me to the topic of leadership and the fact that effective leaders have strong IQ, EQ, and PQ. IQ, and you're all physicians and a lot more scientifically trained than I am, but IQ is your cognitive skill, right? It is what you're born with. All physicians have high IQ. I mean, it's not easy to pass MCAT and USMLEs and boards and be what you do with zero error rate. So you all have very, very high IQ. The fact also is we are born with the IQ. Can't change it. The other two aspects are the EQ and the PQ, emotional quotient and the political quotient. Emotional quotient being how we manage our emotions and how do we really deal with people around their emotions. And political is how do we really influence people to make decisions. Good news is both of those skills can be learned. They are skills, right? And from an effective leader perspective, you need all three. And what I tell my students, I tell my people, and you know, something I learned through practice as a management consultant with Deloitte and Gemini is, if you can really learn to manage all three aspects in a situation, that's wonderful. IQ will get you the job. IQ will get you to be an expert. EQ and PQ will really make you a very influential, effective business leader or a leader wherever you are. So let's unpack these. Let's unpack these a little bit. What is intelligence quotient? I mean, the WAIS scale, which is used for men's and other things, it's really a measure of your cognitive ability. How do you reason? What's your memory? How fast can you process? And how well can you communicate? And that's it. It's really about you and only about you. It's not about how you relate with people. It's not about how you communicate. Anything from an emotional perspective, it's really about your technical skill set, your cognitive ability. And good news is all of you get an A++ on that, right? Now, can you be a very, very good tennis player with that skill set? Absolutely. Can you be a very good soccer player? Maybe not. Now, what do you need for that? And then that's what brings us into the EQ and PQ part. So let's unpack what EQ is. It really is an assessment of dimensions that make up our emotional intelligence. It's an assessment of components that make up our emotional intelligence. So what is emotional intelligence, right? And a multi-health system has this emotional quotient inventory that is the most used assessment around emotional quotient. And it has 15 different elements that really help define EQ of a person. And we use these assessments all the time with the students, with the in my work with the leadership, et cetera, et cetera. But there is the first part is around the self. self-perception and self-expression. Self-perception is self-regard, number one. Am I really confident in my abilities? And do I really believe in that? And do I really walk the walk, right? Self-actualization is, can I set goals? And can I really achieve them? Because that also defines potential. And lastly, self-awareness. Am I aware of my emotions? Am I in connection with my feelings? And I know how I'm feeling. That brings me to self-expression, which is emotional expression being, can I communicate my feelings? Assertiveness means, can I let people know what my needs are without being arrogant, right? There's a fine line between assertiveness and arrogance. And independence is, can I work with autonomy? So it's really about me as a person. Now, the next part is, how do I really bring that to communicate with others? So it's interpersonal relationships. How do I relate? How do I empathize and care for people? And do I have this social good and social justice perspective? And as physicians, I mean, the reason you are in that profession is because you are very, very high on that, right? So you all get, again, an A++ on that. But then that has to translate into two other things. One is decision making. How do you solve problems, especially when emotions are high? That is emotional intelligence. How do you solve problems, not when you're sitting in a room solving math or bio, but how do you solve problems when emotions are high and you are in people situations? Reality testing, can you be objective? Or are you going to be, taken over by emotions? And lastly, impulse control. This is a tough one. I actually suffer from impulse control. I almost always is the first one to jump into a meeting and say something. Not a good thing. Impulse control is, can you really control your need to say something, be deliberate? When you're presented with a situation, can you really look at your assumptions, challenge them, look at different perspectives, take a little bit of a holistic view, and then come to decision? I'm not sure if any of you have read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, but what he says is, if you do that, you make better decisions. So impulse control really is your ability to make better decisions because you take the time to really, pause and, make better decisions. Now, speaking up quickly is a sign of impulse control, but that does not mean you can't make better decisions. But that's sometimes a sign where you can see, how a person may really make decisions. And lastly, stress management. Flexibility is really about adaptability. Can you adapt and change your behavior under stress in terms of decisions you make? Stress tolerance, I don't need to say anything about that one, right? Can you manage stress and still keep moving and make decisions? And optimism is the best way for me to define optimism is Michael Reuter, who I took over for the Business Leadership Center, the former director, and he still says, he's 80 years old, and he still says, your best is yet to come. Anyone he'll meet, he'll say, your best is yet to come. And the feeling of optimism that is injected because of that one statement, it's priceless. And if you can show up with all of these, right? None of us are perfect. Typically, when you do these assessments, there are people on all over the scale, right? But this is what defines emotional intelligence. And if you do your own test, you can actually figure out which are the areas that you're already good at, which are the areas you may want to improve at. You don't have to be perfect, but there are some skills we can develop. So I'm going to play a little short video to demonstrate.
Would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah,
Great.
well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door, that way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour. Till I'm thirsty.
Space out?
Yeah, I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
Peter, would you be a good sport and indulge us and just tell us a little more?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about TPS reports. The thing is, Bob, it's not that I'm lazy.
All right, so what was that? Was that an example of good emotional intelligence or bad emotional intelligence? That was a clip from Office. and that was actually pretty poor. Yeah, I see a hand raised. Kristen?
Bad from Joseph.
Yeah, bad, right? Really bad. Not really being aware, just saying, what they want to say, and bad EI. Now, having been around in global organizations, one trick to really understand how emotionally intelligent a person might be: watch for impulse control. Impulsive, explosive, right? Some people are really explosive, overly talkative, not talkative, but overly talkative and very short-fused. Most likely, they will have low emotional intelligence. Medium, ability to sometimes hold back, filter responses, and decide against an impulse to act. Medium impulse control, I would say majority of folks out there. High impulse control, really deliberate. Really deliberate. And when I look at people in the boardroom, when I look at people in the C-suite, when I look at people in teams that are most inquisitive and most pertinent and most helpful, they tend to have high impulse control. So starting today, that is one thing you can start to practice, right? High impulse control. And then that will start to build your emotional awareness, because that will force you to address all the other dimensions that we talked about. And studies have shown that, in organizations where people have high emotional control, and not everyone will have that, but if you can really get to build on that, improves work performance, improves job satisfaction, organizational commitment, physical and psychological health for everyone. Imagine working with someone who's just rah, 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 and you're not good, versus, hey, let's take a breath and work on it together. And leadership effectiveness, right? So that's really what EI, or emotional quotient, does. And then next is political skill. So I'm going to ask again, and I see Tristan's hand raised. Tristan, do you have a question? All right, if not, I have a question. What do you think political skill is? Or what may it look like? And any suggestions, questions, or any answers on that one?
Tristan, you can unmute yourself. And if you have a question, because she did say I do.
Okay, hello.
Hi.
Thank you. Okay, so just to give context, I'm very curious about this information. I am a teacher. I'm in the educational behavioral health world, and I'm not in the C-suite. However, I am in a program where I'm learning about leadership, where I'm learning about educational leadership specifically. And I was really curious about the clip showed, because I've seen it once before, but I think given the context of kind of what you saw of like describing EQ, I think that's a space that, for example, yes, there are these levels of emotionality and ways that we can understand them, but for example, as a consultant or someone, a leader who's hearing that, I think there's a space for identifying like root cause and kind of seeing, okay, yes, these behaviors are manifesting and maybe this person is really disgruntled. But for example, I'm also studying some aspects of like well-being and job satisfaction. And so there's some aspects in there where it's like not fitting exactly. So I guess my question relates back to the original, I think, question of like what does it mean to kind of be a leader? What does it mean to kind of take care of your people in the scenario that was given? And so given that that basically the CMO was asked to make a decision, I think it really comes down to like the relationships that are already established and kind of what is it that the people are so worried about? Like, has there been, like, is there a level of trust? And I guess my question is, in all of these considerations, sorry, I'm long-winded, but in all these considerations, how is it, there's always like a conflict of interest. And so when you have these priorities at stake, how does one manage both EQ of a mass, for example?
Yeah, no, fair question. And let me just start by saying this: there is no one right answer. It's not a math problem, right? You have to really make the best decision given understanding of all the different dynamics that you described will play out in any scenario like that. And no decision will be a perfect decision either. But if you really are deliberate and try to address as many aspects of a situation to the best you can, and there's a very good principle of do no harm, but do the best you can, most likely your decision will be a good decision, right? And in your life, you make decisions every day, and by the time we are all gone, we would have made at least 10,000 decisions. I can also tell you that of those 10,000, maybe about 5% will be really good decisions. So from a decision-making perspective, depends on the situation, depends on the dynamics, depends on, as an outsider, it is very difficult to really assess the situation. You need to really be in and understand, and consultants can help you objectively really assess, but then your decision has to come from an understanding of all of those dynamics.
I think from a physician's perspective and what I've seen, both within my coaching group and from my actual practice of being a leader, is that for physicians, and because this is about physician leadership, but it applies to other people and other businesses as well, physicians want to be heard. Physicians want to know that you actually care about what they think, that they are in control also. So they want to know, being able to come up with 3 different options. And these are the things that we have to do because we are changing this organization. It's going to go to a bigger one. We have to, because it's A, B, and C. But these are the choices. And this is what I see from all of you, that what are the priorities? And we're going to have to vote as a group. And not everyone's going to be happy with it. And I'm going to tell you up front, this is the way it's going to be. But once we come together and come up with a decision, I want everyone to be in with me on this decision. So it's kind of how you communicate, and that this whole emotional intelligence piece is how you get there. You have to be confident in yourself. You have to learn how to do that. And then you have to know how to read other people. And then here you go on, define political skill. Ruchin?
Yeah, certainly. So political skill, the way political skill is defined is your ability to effectively understand others and use that understanding to influence others. So going back to Krista, this is a very important aspect of making the right decisions. And it is, again, it comes from the work of Ferris et al. At University of Florida, and they define political intelligence as a combination of 4 things: social astuteness, apparent sincerity, networking ability, and interpersonal influence. And I'll do a very quick dive into each of those, but what you'll start to see is, while EQ and IQ could be standalone, PQ comes from the combination of your IQ and EQ. All right. So the first one, and by the way, is this politics or is this political skill? I would argue yes, because they are also trying to understand their constituents and figure out how they can influence them to get the votes that they want. So even though it's a dirty word, what politics really is understanding your people and then influencing them to get to the outcome that you want. So first one is social astuteness, and this is really about pattern recognition. This is in context of this hospital scenario, having an understanding of how people in my organization behave, how do they go, what are those strong links that exist, and using that knowledge to really influence how that organization or that culture moves, right? And then from where does it come from? It comes from self-awareness, one. Reality testing, which is objectivity, understanding how this group is really playing out and seeing it objectively, and then expertise in terms of pattern recognition. And what is pattern recognition? I mean, physicians especially are very, very good at pattern recognition, right? Diagnosis is all about pattern recognition. I see a set of these symptoms, and based on that, I can make a diagnosis. And social astuteness is exactly that. Based on patterns I see in social groups, what do I need to do for that group to move forward, right? And you see this picture of a soccer field. And this is another example of pattern recognition. This picture comes from Cuban crisis, missile crisis time, and JFK time. And there was this idea that Russia is building up, missile bases in Cuba. But US wasn't sure that that was really happening. So JFK said, hey, fly a U-2 over Cuba and take pictures and see if you can find some missile bases. And they flew the U-2s over Cuba, but they did not find any missile bases. However, they saw some of these soccer fields. Now, the analyst who was really looking at these pictures, he said, Cuba is a baseball playing country, soccer fields. And soccer fields emerging all over Cuba said there is someone else other than Cubans in the country, and that was Russia, and that's how they got to really see the missiles in Cuba. Right, now apply that to a social group, right? And you can start to see how understanding how a group behaves, understanding those patterns can really start to move you towards being good at pattern recognition. Now that combined with sincerity, right? You understand the patterns, but now you also have to communicate to influence people. So apparent sincerity, apparent not being not real, but apparent being visible sincerity, right? So these are the straight shooters. These are the people who what you see is what you get kind of people, right? These are the people who come across as authentic, trustworthy, instilling confidence and sense of comfort in others. And these are the people who can actually influence people in these stressful situations. And this skill comes from building your self-expression and the interpersonal competence of the EQ. Now, to give you a very quick example of what this may look like, this is a very short clip from the movie Baby Men, and just look at this interaction.
What are you doing? You could lose everything, your scholarship, that pretty girl. You are a smart kid. Talk to me and I can help you. Otherwise, it'll be out of my hands and you will be wishing that you had.
You might find yourself wishing I hadn't.
Will you let me worry about that?
You really want to know? You really think the truth, honesty is the best policy?
I do.
Always.
When wouldn't it be?
Right. So was Detective Shaw sincere? So the lady is the detective, and the guy, David, I believe, Elliot is his character name in the movie. He is played by Doug Smith. He's a person who has murdered someone. And now they're having this conversation. But Detective Shaw, I mean, if you look at her in that clip, she's coming across as very authentic, very deliberate. This is who I am, and talk to me, right? And those are the kind of people, when you start to see around you, those are the people who will always be like that, and you'll have a lot of confidence in talking to them because you'll know that they are not going to be backbiting or saying something and doing something else. And that's very, very important to really gain this political influence. The third piece is networking ability. And I mean, I won't belabor this one. It is really about an ability to have a network and then call on that network to help you execute on things that need to be executed to move things forward, right? And that's what it is. And everyone talks about networking and the importance of networking. And what I will say on that is quantity of people in your sphere is important. The quality of those relationships is more important, because it's the quality of those relationships that will really impact your ability to use your network power to help make and move decisions, right? So that's what networking ability is. And the last one is then interpersonal influence, right? We said political skills is all about being able to influence the decisions or the outcomes. So if you have sincerity, if you have astuteness, social astuteness, if you have networks, then interpersonal influence really starts to play in terms of you really start to influence the decisions that need to be influenced. And from EQ and IQ perspective, the interpersonal and stress management parts of EQ really drives your ability to have a lot of influence. And I'm going to play another very short clip here, and this is from the movie Apollo 13.
Gene, we have a situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the lunar module.
5 filters on the LEM.
Which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doc,
you're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15 and you get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
They take square cartridges.
The ones on the LEM are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
It just isn't a contingency we've remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that.
All right. So that was an example of interpersonal influence, right? I mean, in this situation, again, we're looking at it from outside, but the reason the NASA administrator was able to really say, hey, do this, and people were at it, is because he had earned the right to be able to say that because of everything that he had done in the background in terms of social astuteness, in terms of, their sincerity of, they really have best interest in mind and do what they need to do to make the mission successful, and right. So that's the kind of influence you need to aspire towards if you really want to be able to effectively execute decisions in an organization. And that could be as simple as let's start this new line of service, to as complex as we have to go through a merger, right? And again, studies have shown that people who have good political skill sets, they have seen a lot of career success, a lot of reduced stress. Organizations have lower turnover, decreased burnout, and increased job performance. And in my view, physicians start to do that, right? If they start to really practice this and become mainstream in not only providing care, but influencing how a hospital operates, that can only be good for the patient. That's where we started. So the question then is, can EQ and PQ be developed, right? Absolutely. I mean, the work that we have done at the Leadership Center at Seton Hall, over the 4 years for our undergrad students, we have been able to increase their EQ by about 10%. So imagine a team of 10, everyone with 10% increased EQ. You have a team that is 100% high EQ. Can you imagine how that team operates? And then we have conducted surveys, and this is the result, right? On a scale of 1 to 5, most leaders are not effective. That's what people say across organizations. Effective leaders can be developed because they think these skills are developed or developable. And then when it comes to, does my organization do a good job at developing people? The answer is, 50-50. So what does it mean for you? I mean, as a first step, there are some tools out there that you can really start to use for yourself to build self-awareness. There are tools like Clifton Strengths, the EQI model that I shared, Hogan assessments that people can do for you. This is a free tool online. If you look for political skills inventory, there is a list of 18 questions that you can answer, and then it will give you a score on where you stand on your political skills. And then that's a good way to really get started on your journey of self-assessment, self-awareness, and where you stand. And with that, I'll hand it over to Sandy to talk about MHL a little bit, and then we'll open it up for more Q&A.
Yeah, there's another Sandy who asked a question about how she can get this kind of training. So this is a good segue, I think,
Yeah,
Sandy.
exactly.
The other Sandy, but I don't see her on
Sandy.
here. The other
Sandy,
Sandy
please.
is no longer there, but she asked a question: what is the continuing education system or trainings that teach leaders to develop EI within themselves? Go ahead, Sandy.
So an excellent way to do that is our Accelerated Healthcare Leadership Program here at Brown, which is a diverse student body, so not just clinicians, but we really like for folks from across the healthcare sectors to learn from each other, and that really helps to develop your EQ, for example, and your PQ in terms of how you can influence others who might be similar or different from yourself. It's a one-year program, comprises 3 residential sessions in Providence, where you get to meet your classmates and the faculty in person. And then the remainder of your coursework is delivered online. So folks continue to work in their professional careers while they're in the program. You participate in many of the amazing traditions here at Brown, and we really try and integrate you into the Brown community. This is the Van Wickle Gates, and commencement is this weekend. And so we're really excited. These very fancy gates, only open for convocation and for commencement. And so this weekend will be one of those dates that the gates will swing in the other direction, which is outwards, so that students process out into the world to take their knowledge and skills into the world. We have 2 enrollment options for our program. You can start either in the summer, so we have students starting in a few weeks, or you can start in the fall semester, and we are still taking applications for that fall session. And it's intended to be a 1-year degree from May to May or from September to September. So that gives you a really quick flavor of one of the types of ways that you can expand your skills in this area. We're one of the few programs that has a specified leadership development curriculum. So not only are you learning about healthcare and the healthcare marketplace, but you're also learning, you're working on your personal leadership development and development skills. So it's a great combination of business skills, healthcare skills, and leadership skills.
Now, I remember I actually did the course. The MHL was a little bit different. They've thanks to Sandy, you sounds like you've been upgrading it, making it better, making it more valuable to people. And even for the time period has changed, which is a lot more efficiently run. I just want to say that I remember doing the 360, assessment, where I asked each one of my direct reports and colleagues and even my boss how I was doing. I've never done anything like that before. And as expected, I did really well for the direct reports. This was anonymously done. Where I didn't do so well and I got a C, was what I would call a C. An average score was for my boss. I'm like, what the heck is this? And you get an advisor. So I called my advisor. I'm like, I don't really understand. I got A's from everyone else, but C from this one person. And he basically advised me to call my boss, which I called him that day. And he said, Elsie, I don't really know what you do. I'm like, what? That was an eye opener. So every little bit of learning of leadership, if you're interested, I highly recommend this program. It is like, thank you so much for sharing that, Joseph. He says my class had about 30 who had six physicians only, and he's calling it basically saying there's JDs, MBAs, RNs. There's so many different types of people in healthcare. So it's going to be, because of that mix, it helps you learn in a lot more collaborative, outside the box kind of thinking. So Sandy, go ahead. Anything you want to add?
No, that's it. Thanks for giving me a moment to talk about the program. And Joe is also an alum, and Elsie's an alum. So we have some great physician leadership. Oh, and Jeff Elmore is even on the call too, and he's also an alum. So, and part of the reason
the JD, Sandy, of course, right?
Part of the reason we do this is because folks in the program really enjoy the engagement and the conversations that we have and they have with each other throughout the program. And so this is a way of being able to continue that engagement. So we want to be able to have some time for some of that engagement, some of the conversation. So please feel free to ask questions and further this conversation about physician leadership in healthcare.
Does anyone have a question? Jeffrey, I see you're unmuted.
I know Sandy unmuted me, I think, right?
I didn't, but
not to put you on the spot or anything.
Admittedly, yeah, sure. No, admittedly, I reread before and I was working and I just jumped on. So I had something that I was curious about before, and is it okay if I ask it if I wasn't part of the conversation earlier?
Of course.
Go ahead.
Yeah. One of the experiences that you guys were talking about, like the political EQ, IQ, PQ, and I think that as I'm an OBGYN physician, and I was reading beforehand about some of the stuff like breaking down silos, and that was like a big topic in my MHL cohort. And I think it's kind of curious, that's such an important thing. But when I was reading about it, I read this great HBR article today, it was like, those people that maybe tend to naturally gravitate towards doing that, they also are the ones that tend to have the highest burnouts and actually have a lot of higher incidence of behavioral health problems or adverse reactions at work. And I think it's so interesting because it was they push the boundaries, and it's almost like it takes so much out of them, and there's not enough workplace support around those. And I that is kind of I have seen that in people and it's been my experience. And I'm curious whether you see that happening and whether, like when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, it's not part of our formal roles. So there's not a lot of support you can wrap around somebody if you say, like, I need you to be the person that goes between silos, although it's probably built into some leadership things. But how do we support those people? Because you have to be able to have EQ, IQ, and PQ in different ways to go between those groups. Because if you're in one specialty, you have to go to the other, and then between leadership. Like, how do you create that or wrap it or bake it into something so that you're being like, you're getting that fourth aim and you're taking care of those people, but you're allowing them to keep doing that because it's such a big drain on them personally?
Yeah, I can attempt to answer that because I was in that situation for at least 5 years. So when I moved from consulting and took on the role of head of innovation at Boehringer Ingelheim, I had a very good job description, which was just 2 lines long, which is, as a company, we don't know what we will be 30 years from now and help us prepare to get there. Right. And it was literally, a clean slate to think about how to transform a company and transform it at really its DNA level. And that the role really was about breaking down silos and figuring out how we do things differently. And I fully agree with you, right? It's a highly stressful job because you're always being questioned. You are always in people's way. And there's not always a very clear objective and outcome, right? When you are in those kind of roles where you're breaking silos. And a few things become really important in that case. One is, at what level are you operating? It's much easier for a CEO to drive that change and break down those silos than a person 1, 2, 3 levels down, right? Because they don't have same kind of, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more in the next session when we talk about power and politics. But from a positional power perspective, they don't really have that positional power because they are now operating amongst peers and not, don't have that ability. So that sponsorship becomes very, very important. Number 2, why are we really changing in the first place is very, very important. And having a very, very clear vision and idea on that so that you can actually say this is why. And even more importantly, being able to convince people by telling them what's in it for them. Because whenever there is change, when there is breaking of silos, there's no interest in doing that because people are set in their ways, they are making good with what they're doing and they're successful. So why should they change? So it's really, very, very difficult from that perspective as well. And therefore, those 3 things, right? The position that you're operating at, the clarity of the why, and what's in it for them, being very, very clear on that are 3 things you have to be very good at. That said, there is so much organizational flux that happens that your executive sponsor today may not be there tomorrow. And so, it becomes really a thankless job. But that said, is it an important job? It absolutely is. Because even if you're not successful in breaking the silos totally, you do transform the DNA enough for the ship to steer in a different direction. It's not a speedboat. It's a ship you're steering, and that's what you have to do. But yeah, I mean, of the 100 people who try, 5 do it really well, 95 try and burn out. But that said, is it a worthwhile thing? Yes.
That's really great. I mean, I think, and this might not be clearly what you were asking, but I mean, what I heard from you is that how do you not get so burnt out if you're type of person learning IQ, PQ, EQ, and now you're becoming a better leader and suddenly everyone's giving you everything to do. And how do you not burn out? Because you're taking on so much because you feel like you could do it all and then everybody wants you. And for me, and I think this is an important question because we all deal with this, and I've heard from physicians who had this problem, is that we have to be really intentional, and this is emotional intelligence, on what it is that we want. What is it? I mean, we don't think about it. We go every day, we do the same thing, and we expect like a different result, and we can't. We have to start being intentional about our short and long-term goals. And when you come up with your dream goal, 1 or 2 big goals, is what I tell my clients is then you will direct your life into the right direction because you have all these skills now. You've developed your self-confidence. You're working against the imposter syndrome that everybody has and don't want to talk about. You got your emotional intelligence and you're learning to use that and recognizing what other people are doing. But now you got to really focus on you. And I think that's where physicians get trapped because they get trapped in this rat race and they get burnt out because they're not really doing what they really love. And if you're not doing what you really love, then you're going to burn out.
Yeah.
I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the right answer as well. If you're feeling burnt out, maybe the role is not worth it. And it's time to steer your own direction. But that said, you don't get paid for leaving, you get paid for sticking, and people who can stick for a long time, who are resilient. So EQ really helps you stick for the long term. If you find in what you're doing.
That's very helpful. That's also very helpful in like trying to help guide somebody below you. And so I appreciate that's really good advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we have time for about like one more question. We've had some great conversation. And Tristan raised her hand again. So let's hear what your question is.
Okay, thank you so much. It actually relates rather spot on with Jeffrey's prior question. So I saw the clip that you happened to skip over with Patch Adams, and it was my question has to do with being an outlier and kind of talking about infrastructure and talking about systemic conditions and considerations that impact how individuals show up. And I guess my question is like you already answered it with like this idea of like it depends on positionality, like where you exist in the social structure. But I guess my question is like in the program or in the conversations about this change management, is there like this consideration of historical causation? Like, is there this like future viability? Like you just mentioned, for example, how will AI show up in medical field? How all these different things, like, I think I hear both the question that was asked and also like I'm curious if there is that like historical context, like, yes, this is the infrastructure that you're against. Like, yes, being a change, it will cause burnout because of this, because more or less it's like a grassroots function. Does that make sense?
Can you just tell your question in one sentence, please? Because
Yeah.
I kind of understand what you're saying.
So my question is, within the program context, given all the leadership and every other skills that you're mentioning, PQ, IQ, and everything, in all that, is there historical causation considered in evaluations of what it means to be a change agent in existing infrastructure? That's like Ruchin was saying, like the status quo, like how, like, does that make sense better?
And you mean the Brown program?
Either or, just in general, like what it means, like for
Sandy,
example,
or maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, sure. So we take that notion very seriously, and certainly as you're thinking about your PQ, and you really have to understand others and their lived experiences and how they show up in the world in order to think about how you're going to bring teams together and how you're going to influence an organization, how you're going to generate cultural change in terms of how your organization behaves, right? So you're right. People bring all those kinds of things to work with them. Everybody brings their own set of lenses and their own experience that they've brought, and we really do emphasize that quite a bit in the program. We have some very specific sort of DEI curriculum around helping everyone in the program think about those issues. And then we specifically look at the curriculum from an equity lens. So every course in the curriculum attempts to, in some way, address how does, for example, how does equity show up in healthcare policy? How does equity show up in health law, in quality improvement, in all of the different contexts of the curriculum of the program? So we're trying to build all of that into the program structurally. So maybe Ruchin can speak to it sort of more globally on an organizational level.
Yes, from a work perspective, the way historical context comes into play in any organizational change is its culture. So if you really think of what an organizational culture is, it's built up of a lot of principles and practices that organization has adopted over a period of time, and that's the history of the organization. And they say, culture eats strategy for lunch. The reason they say that is because you can have the IQ, EQ, PQ, and most importantly, IQ. But if you don't understand culture, which is the historical context, you can't change anything. And EQ and PQ actually help you understand that history, that culture, and therefore leap forward to what change is possible and drive to that. Because culture can also tell you how much and what kind of change is possible. So that's another way to really think about it.
Excellent. I want to say thank you to both of our panelists tonight, Dr. Elsie Koh and Ruchin Kansal. We really appreciate the insight that you brought to the conversation tonight. And I want to mention that we have part 2 of this conversation coming up on Tuesday, June 4th. I hope that some of the students who are in residence at that time will join us as well for the conversation. So look forward to talking more with all of you about leadership and leading in healthcare organizations. So thank you all for joining tonight. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you. Thank you for Sandy for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks. Have a good evening.